During his press conference this week with South Korea's head of state, the image captured shows a reporter's fleshed out question ahead of the president calling on her. Press secretary said this in response.
The LA Times said that their reporter did not submit any questions in advance of yesterday's press conference. So to people who saw that pocket card, can you explain how that ended up there and why the president needed something like that?
It is entirely normal for a president to be briefed on reporters who will be asking questions at a press conference and issues that we expect they might ask about. Look, we do not have specific questions in advance.
Dr. Mark Siegel yesterday said he's spoken to past presidents who say they didn't need these kinds of what he calls helper notes. Take a listen.
What do I look for? I look for the ability for thinking, for clear thinking, for what we call executive function. Can you do complex decisions? Can you think outside the box? Can you be flexible if something comes in? There's a threat coming from another country. You're just hearing about it for the first time. Do you need a cheat sheet? We need cognitive testing here.
Let's bring in the power panel. Lauren Wright, political science lecturer at Princeton University, and Leslie Marshall, who is a Fox News contributor. Ladies, thanks so much for joining me today. Leslie, let's start with you. Let's talk about these so-called cheat sheets. It is, in fact, very normal for presidents to have these kinds of pocket cards that give them directions for events, where they're supposed to go, who they're going to talk to, the choreography of the events. It is not, however, as quote, normal, to use Karine Jean-Pierre's own words, for him to have these sort of like fleshed out, very detailed questions that reporters are going to ask him. That's still not been accounted for in this exchange.
Well, the reporter in this case in the New York Times and the LA Times and the LA Times here in Los Angeles, where I am, have said they provided no questions in advance. And, you know, reporters across the spectrum, whether they work for right or left-leaning periodicals, I've never in any presidency seen or heard, and you know yourself, reporters don't want to. It's sort of like you don't want to show the ace up your sleeve. You want to have it be that boom moment.
Not.
However, I will say, even on my radio show, and I'm certainly not president of the United States, when I have high-profile people on, there are things that we talk about, we're going to discuss, not the exact questions that are going to be posed.
Topics.
And whether it's a name pronunciation, which was on that sheet, and whether it's a topic. But, you know, if they think, you know, she's probably or he's probably going to ask something like this, I really don't have a problem with that, one. And two, except for a doctor, and I know we just heard from a doctor, one of our own here, you know, none of us are in any position to question somebody's level of executive function. People with ADHD have executive function issues, you know, or to say it's a cognitive issue. And lastly, that cognitive test is a joke. I've taken it just to see. It's a picture of an elephant. I mean, I think almost everyone knows what an elephant is. So they don't have really accurate cognitive testing. Anybody will tell you that.
Lauren, what do you say to that? You heard Dr. Siegel there questioning President Biden's mental acuity based on the fact that he requires that kind of input from staff. What do you say to that?
I mean, notes are very common. Certainly, President Obama used them on his speeches. President Trump even had some notes that were photographed. Yes, embarrassingly, to talk to the Parkland families, saying be empathetic or tell me what you need to reduce your pain. But this, I actually think, is quite different, and it seems outrageous to people looking at it on its face, because there is a difference between notes and what appears to be, for some reason, the exact question. It didn't come out the same from the LA Times reporter, but the framing was the same, the topic was the same. And so whether there's any truth to it or not, whether it's a coincidence, which it may be, the LA Times suggested it would be, it looks fishy to people. And that's really the problem here. I actually think it's less embarrassing for the White House than it is for the LA Times. I mean, most presidents would say, sure, give me the questions. I would love to see them. You know, that's what press operations do. But journalistically, it's a bad look, and I'm sure people will be paying close attention to these types of things going forward.
Take a look at this. Reporters said that President Biden seemed to kind of forget his recent trip to Ireland when he was asked about his travels yesterday. Watch.
You've traveled to? the last country I've traveled, I'm thinking what's the last one I was in. I've been to 89. I met with 89 heads of state so far. So I'm trying to think, where was the last place I was? It's hard to keep track. I mean, yeah, you're right, Ireland. That's where it was. How'd you know that?
Watching that for the first time yesterday, my first thought was like, how could you not remember that you were just in Ireland for like a week, until I realized that for $1 million, I couldn't have told you like where I was the day before.
If you're asking me, yeah, I'm in LA. Okay, and I'm in between the two of you. But today I'm in Los Angeles. Tuesday I'm in Washington, D.C. Thursday I'm going to be in Miami. Sunday I'm going to be in L.A. again. Then I'm going to be in New York. Look, there's a movie called If It's Tuesday, It Must Be Belgium, and there's a reason for that. If you travel a lot, you can be confused as to, wait, where was I, that I was? And I think that's jet lag. And look, I think there are people out there that just want to focus on, his age. I get it. That's going to be a consideration for voters even in my party, Democrats. But really, that is not the #1 issue on voters' minds, even those concerned about that in my party. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to a race between him and Donald Trump, even women that have pulled away in recent polls, the Fox News poll, they're going to look at some issues like banning books, abortion, reproductive rights, and they're going to vote for Joe Biden all over again.
Well, the #1 issue this year for voters was the economy. Take a look at this, Lauren. The former White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, came to the vice president's defense this week, brushing off concerns about her popularity, which is sinking. Quote from Klain, "I do think that sexism and racism are part of the problem, no question about it. She's done a lot of very hard work and been very successful as vice president." Well, Axios reports there is a push underway at the White House to bolster and rehabilitate the vice president's image. And as Leslie mentioned, Fox News polls now show 54% of voters disapprove of Harris's job performance, and 57% have an unfavorable opinion of her. So what do you say to Ron Klain? Is that just a punt, or is there some legitimacy?
I mean, her popularity is low, and it is problematic for the White House, whether you think it's fair or not. I tend to think criticism of her is fair. I think it's very problematic when we say a woman of color who's in such a serious position can't be questioned at all. And she's a serious politician. She's the first woman of color in the vice presidency. She made it. She served for many years in California in various capacities. So to say, for instance, we can't question her performance in an interview about immigration when she was a senator from a border state and should be able to very easily handle those questions, I think is very insulting to President Kamala Harris. I also think, and I have a lot of data on this from a project I'm working on with a student, part of the problem is she was actually very popular when she came into the administration, hugely. Above 50%, approaching 60%. She was a very effective messenger, as survey experiments that I conducted show. And then that dropped off once people started seeing her fulfill her role and her duties. And finally, many of these problems are ones that were there on the 2020 campaign trail. That's why she dropped out in 2019, even before the very first contest. And the leaks in her office, the turnover is unprecedented compared to other politicians. She's had these issues for a while. And so I do think it's fair to critique someone in a position of power, especially when the president is so old.
Every politician elected to office deserves scrutiny. That includes especially the president and vice president, and especially an administration where the vice president will, if there's a second term, be serving with a president who will be in his 80s. This is uncharted territory for Americans. Ladies, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much. Great talking to you this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, you don't want to miss this. Our own Benjamin Hall, whose new book, Saved, is now a New York Times bestseller, will have an exclusive sit-down interview with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. It's going to air Monday during Special Report with Bret Baier. That's right here on Fox News Channel, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday evening. Well, the Biden administration is suing Tennessee over the state's